For some background, before we start, we are teenagers living in a small town in a third world country and well trained in MMA and survival stuff, and so by no means am I small. I'm 6 foot, and my first friend is also 6 foot. Let's call him H, and his younger brother, who is maybe 5'10", let's call him M. And we're all no strangers to exploring old places. It's a hobby, you can say. The story happened 2 days ago, when me and my friend wanted to go and explore this old school 15 minutes away from where we live. We packed a bag containing water, flashlights, and knives, and a Bible because one of my friends was a devout Christian. We all are, but he is heavy on it, like he wants to be a monk when he grows up. We packed our bag and started the 15-minute walk. It was a quiet walk. The air was not cold nor hot. At about 7:40, 7:45ish, we reached the school. We prayed and then we entered. As soon as we set foot in the school, you could smell the mold, and that smell, I could still taste it at the back of my throat. It smelled like a body of a rotting animal. It was so bad, we covered our noses with our shirts. "Guys, what the hell is that smell?" I asked. H replied saying, "I don't know, it's so bad, I want to throw up." "Want me to sprint to my house and get masks?" M said. I replied saying there is no need, and we'll just be quick. We went deeper into the school, and the smell kept getting worse. We reached the hallway, and it looked like what you expect it to look like. Paper everywhere, desks flipped in the hallway, and water and mold everywhere. But one thing stood out, a bloody handprint. It didn't look old, it was still fresh. So fresh that the blood was still dripping on the wall. To be honest, I wanted to leave that second, but something kept me going. Other than the bloody handprint, nothing happened until we reached the second floor. A loud running sound. We all heard it. "Yo, we should get the hell out of here," M said. I agreed, saying, "I think we should leave. This isn't good." "Let's leave As H was speaking, the sound of the main door closed. We pulled out our knives. We weren't going down without a fight. I thought if the person or thing wanted us, he had to bleed. We were all silent, no one spoke. I gestured to my friend to not cause any noise and follow me. Before going down the stairs, we decided to pull out our flashlights and use them. We went down and reached the hallway. We tried to walk as silent as possible because we felt like our lives depended on it, and it did. We reached the door, but it didn't open, so H suggested we go to the other door, about a 15-meter walk from the main door. M was still trying to open the main door, and I was looking at the left hallway, and when I and H wanted to tell M that we should go to the other door, by sheer luck, he opened the main door. We all cheered in relief, in this soft, scared tone, but as he was opening the door, a big rusty door, which needed a big push, I looked at the left hallway, and there he was, a tall man, maybe 7-8 feet, wearing a torn jacket with military jeans, boots, staring at us. He was holding something long. It was a sledgehammer. I budged my friend in fear, and when he turned to look, he dropped his knife, so his brother also turned. They both frantically started to push the door, but I was in a staring contest with him until my friend pulled me from my bag and we started running. We ran until we couldn't anymore. I looked at my phone. It was 10:48. We continued walking in silence until we were in town. We just sat down in silence at what just happened. Then we walked to our houses, also in silence. Their houses were first, then mine, a minute or two from their house. I didn't sleep much that night, thinking about what happened to that man, and what he wanted to do, and what that bloody handprint was. But the thing that ate at me most was, what if we went through the left hallway to the other door? What was going to happen to us, because he was waiting for us? Back when I was in my early to mid-teens, around 07 to 08, me and a bunch of friends would hang out at an abandoned old school, a very small school with only 8 classrooms, a teacher's room, a cafeteria, 2 bathrooms, and one room we had no idea what it was, since it was always locked, but I'll get back to that later. This school hadn't been able to keep up with the 80s modernization of our town, and a large number of newcomers that followed with it. And as such, it quickly closed down in favor of new schools and buildings by the end of the 80s. Most of the place was boarded up completely, but you could enter through a window in one of the classrooms, where the board had been ripped down. Our routine was always the same. Whoever of us got off the school first would go down to the building and go through the different rooms to make sure everything was empty and safe, as these buildings had earlier been known as the local spot for drug addicts, and used needles and such was a common sight for us by this point. So this one day, me and a friend of mine were the first ones to get out of the school, and as per usual, we take the walk down to the building, but upon entering and stepping out from the classroom and into the hallway, we immediately see a large man. I remember him as quite huge, but that might possibly be how he appeared to us as kids. And my friend lets out a huge scream. The man doesn't appear shocked or even scared, and doesn't even seem to react to us, but he turns to look at us and then asks, "Have you guys seen?" and then asks about my friend. We tell the guy that we haven't seen anyone and only just got there, to which he sighs and shrugs and then pushes past us to leave the same way we just entered. Now, our friend has an unusual name, so the chances that this guy was just looking for another random guy who just happened to have the same name were pretty low, but none of us had ever seen this guy before, and I happened to know most of my friend's family as well. When we described what the guy looked like to our friend, he didn't seem to know who this guy could have been, and for the next few months, we were too scared to go back. When we did return, about 3 to 4 months later, it was the middle of summer vacation, and we thought it would be fun to climb up on the roof of the building and sunbathe. Upon climbing it, we found the roof to be rather weak and close to caving in, but something made us take the risk and dare to venture out on the roof after all. A hole in the roof, which we figured would have been directly above the room we had never been in. The hole is in the roof was only about the size of a football, and one of my friends came up with the idea to lower her arm down into the hole and film the room using her phone, so we could finally see what's inside there. She puts her arm down there, and as she is filming, she suddenly lets out a blood-curdling scream and immediately retracts her arm, but her phone isn't with her anymore. She was certain that something had knocked it from her hand, and as we looked down through the hole, we could see her phone laying on the floor. We all decided to climb down from the roof and enter the building, now intent on doing whatever it was to get into that room, so our friend wouldn't have to return home without a phone and have to explain what happened. About 30 minutes later, we finally managed to make a hole in the door and put our hands inside so we could open the door from the inside. The door now opened with no trouble. We step inside and we all stare in silence. To this day, I still have no idea what this room was doing inside of a school, and I sincerely hope it has never been used for what it looked like it was intended for. The room is about 4 by 4 meters, and the floor and walls are all of solid concrete. In the left corner of the room, from where we entered, was 2 metal bowls sitting on the floor, and at the back of the room was 5 chains dangling from the wall, 4 with equal-sized handcuffs, and 1 large that looked like it would fit around the neck. Needless to say, we swiftly picked up my friend's phone and immediately left the place. However, the room had us both scared, but also slightly intrigued, so after some talk back and forth, that same night, we decided to go back to look at it again the following day. When we returned the next day, we found the door to be locked once again, and someone had covered the hole we made in the door with a large wooden board nailed on the door. Once again, we immediately left, and after that visit, we have never returned. I have no idea what we stumbled upon that day, but I am certain my days hanging out at this place is what sparked my interest in abandoned places. When I was 10, my school went on a trip to Edinburgh, Scotland. It took ages to get there, and by the time we got off the coach, everybody was really tired. I was sharing a room with some of my friends. I'll just call them by their initials. We unpacked when we got into our hotel and chilled for a bit before we went out for a tour of the city with a guide. Everybody was really tired, so no one was really paying attention. When we got back to our hotel at about 8, we were told to go to bed. We all just laid in our beds, wide awake, because nobody could sleep. At about 9:30, there was a really loud truck driving past our window, so I got up to shut the window because it was cold anyways. When I looked down, I could see on the opposite side of the street an old man outside the door of the house opposite to us, staring up at the roof. There was also a group of teenage girls, talking quickly in a foreign language. I did what any reasonable person would have done, and looked up. Directly across from me, standing on the roof of the old man's house, there was a man, his feet inches away from the edge, looking at me. I still remember his face, and that he was wearing a hoodie, tracksuit, and Nike trainers. It dawned on me that he was going to jump. I shut the window immediately and told my friends, all of whom were petrified. O started to cry, and T started hyperventilating, and just then, there was a knock on our room. Then came more knocks as somebody frantically banging on the door. By this point, we were practically crapping ourselves. Although my friends told me not to, I opened the door, and in came the same girls who were down on the street. They were talking what I think was Italian, and asking in broken English where my teacher was. I pointed them down to the corridor to Mr. F's room, and they left. Moments later, Mrs. M came in, white as sheet, and told us not to look out of the window. I told her that we already had, and she started to break down and telling us to get our stuff and go. Panicking, we were escorted down the corridor to Mr. F's room, where we stayed, talking for hours, until we eventually calmed down. Mrs. M then took us downstairs to another room, where we stayed the night, and she stayed with us. The rest of the trip passed without incident. Of course, our parents were informed, and I could see the next morning that even the teachers were visibly shaken. Nobody told us what had happened to the man on the roof. For all I know, he could be dead. But none of my friends ever forgot what happened that night across from room 407.